Welcome to the Life's Best Medicine podcast, where we are finding hope and healing one episode at a time. No appointment needed, no rubber gloves, and no coping. Just a healthy dose of life lessons to help equip you for this wild journey we call life. This episode of Life's Best Medicine is brought to you by the great people at Simply Snacking. This could be a survival tool, actually. Now, this is not scientifically proven, and I don't recommend this. However, Shawn Baker is a big man. He's 6'5", and he has six-pack abs, and he's bulging muscles, and he's very intense. So I have several of these that I keep, only the beef flavor ones, by the way. Chicken, I don't think is going to work with Shawn Baker, but the beef flavor, I think if you have him pre-open and you upset him, you could throw him on the ground and distract him long enough to get away. I think he would like it. He might spit out the hemp hearts, but other than that, I think we'll be okay. So don't try this. I don't recommend it. I say just be nice to Shawn. I think by this interview, you're gonna see what a great guy he is and what a story. But also, don't try the chicken with him. You could like the chicken. The chicken's good. There's 10 flavors. Everyone loves him. And I gravitate towards the beef myself, lower carb options. And but I will tell you, I have tried the apple and cherry, and I love that one too. So this could save your life, people. Listen up. But I hope you enjoy this podcast. And I thank you, Simply Snacking, for making this possible. Hello and welcome to the Life's Best Medicine podcast. I've captured the king of beasts here. This guy is a very scary man when you see him. He's like, I don't know, man, dude. He looks like he's 6'10", but I think he's like he's a little shorter than that. Shawn Baker, who's the king of the carnivores. This guy, he's a guy who I think a lot of people don't understand him. I've had the pleasure of spending a little time with him at his house. My dogs are bigger than his. I thought he'd have like 7 Rottweilers. He actually is nice to his neighbors, man. This guy gets a bad rap more than like the Grinch. And he's helped so many dang people. I remember when I first heard about him, I was like, this can't be true. It can't be real. And then I started talking to these people. And, you know, Brett, who you've already heard by now, he's someone whose life was changed by Shawn Baker. So Shawn, welcome. Dr. Baker, welcome.
Well, thank you, Dr. Brian. It's a pleasure to be here. And I'm 6'5", just for the record. But
yeah, you look like 6'10" to me, man. When I stood next to you, I was like, oh my gosh,
it's all
like,
relative.
dude.
You know, I remember when I was in high school basketball, I played against a kid who was 7 foot tall, legit 7-footer, and it was like being in another planet, like another species. It was weird because I'm not used to people being much taller than me. You know, sometimes there's people my height or maybe an inch bigger, but seeing someone like 6 or 7 inches taller than you is kind of like bizarre. And so I guess, you know, maybe you have that effect on people that are, you know, kind of sort of more than that normal height. But yeah, anyway, what was the comment that I was going to say? Yeah, no, I'm a nice guy. I don't get to, you know, I get my share of stuff, but I think what you alluded to with Brett, I get plenty of positive feedback. There's so much wonderful, happy people that tell me their wonderful stories, and that by far overshadows any of the negativity that's out there. So, but the negativity is, you know, it seems to be, you kind of notice it more, but by far the general thing has been positive.
What do you think, like when you know, because I've been on podcasts. I was actually on a vegan guy's podcast that I like a lot. Ian Kramer, actually, we had a really good time. But he brought up you and Tro, and he goes, hey, these guys are like, you know, not respectful. I'm like, you know, it's a tough thing. And I tried to defend you and go, look, when you get attacked over and over, at some point you just get tired of it. You back someone into a corner long enough, it's like, okay, I'll be nice. But at some point you kind of, you know, it kind of gets to you, and I can understand that.
Well, yeah, I mean, I spent a year trying to be rational and reasonable with people, and I found that it never sort of it was not very fruitful. It was a waste of time. And so I kind of, my target audience is not the vegans for sure. I mean, I feel bad for them because not only are they eating a nutritionally inferior diet and believing they're eating the best diet, and they're clearly misled. Not only do many people find them to be annoying and you know, they're not very socially you know, accepted in a lot of groups, but they're also being used as kind of pawns for the processed food industry. And so, I mean, they've got, you know, as much as they try to do and want to do the right thing and they believe they're doing that, I mean, they're they're just unfortunately misled, and they're being kind of, I often call them useful idiots for processed food companies, because they're sort of, that's been their sort of message has been co-opted by these people that are just going to make a bunch of money off of that, and they're kind of just propagating the sort of the misinformation that's out there. So I certainly respect and I will fully say that anyone has a right to pick the diet they want to be on. If they want to be on a diet, I will fully defend that in any way I can, but I expect the same in return for me and other people that decide that they choose an animal-based diet. I think that just makes sense. So the people that are out there saying we should make meat illegal, or we should get rid of it, or get rid of animal agriculture, or tax it, or treat meat eaters as somehow pariahs, put them outside with the smokers, those disgusting, filthy smokers, make them sit outside in the cold. We have people from the United Nations saying that. So that I think is a problem.
Yeah, I think that's a hard thing, because I know you're, just spending time with you, you're a mellow guy. You have a piano behind you. You're pretty chill, and I know you're not playing. I try to, man, Shawn, I tried to get to pretend like you were playing it. You put one finger on there. You didn't even make it look like legit. We could have pulled it off, but I see you. You're a cool guy with your neighbors. You hang out. You help people. You do a lot of good stuff, and you have a lot of integrity. And I've seen that you put up with a lot. And I think, in defense of the vegans, I think you're getting a small fraction of them. Like, most people I know are just like, they want to live their life and they're not going to, but the stuff I've seen directed at you, I can honestly say I've never seen anyone else get, like, there was one from I think it was a physician said, I hope I get to be the one to intubate you. I hope you have a heart attack. I hope your family, like, one thing after another. I'm like, man, why are people like, really? I thought, man, I don't want to get into this kind of realm. If this is just kind of, that's there's something wrong. I mean, that's just not natural behavior. Like, I don't care what you eat, dude. I don't care what you do. It's just like, enjoy your life.
Well, you get guys like Joel Furman. I can remember. I vaguely remember that comment on something. I want to be the one that intubates you as you're dying or something, or Joel Furman out there saying you should be thrown in jail and arrested. It's just, that to me is just, it's bizarre. The sort of thing that I don't wish disease or illness upon anyone, even though like I said, I talk about vegans, and I fully understand it. And I've got my sort of in-laws, sister and brother-in-law are vegetarian. They're not vegan, but they're vegetarian. But we get along great with them. They come over. When we go out to eat, they eat. We give them our sides, and we eat the steaks and stuff. And so it works out really well. But there was just an online. I guess it's the activists that are out there that are really the ones that are aggressive, and those are the ones I tend to push back against.
Yeah, I think that. And so, Shawn, when you get attacked like that, where do you go to? Like, where's your peace? Where do you say, hey, look, what motivates you is what I'm asking. Like, where do you say, hey, look, I feel like I want to be the front guy for this, which you've been. What gave you that motivation or desire?
Well, I think understanding what you're up against. I think, I point to the fact that I've just seen, now, I mean, literally tens of thousands of people whose lives have been, dramatically positively improved by the message that I've been sort of putting out in others. And I'm not going to take this all credit for. There's been a lot of us in this sort of nutrition sphere. I mean, only a small fraction of physicians really even give any thought to nutrition with their patients. We're not taught that. It's not part of our curriculum. It's not in our tool belt typically. So I certainly say anybody, even vegans, if you're out there at least saying lifestyle, I applaud you for that. But the fact that I've had so many people be successful and talk to me about how their lives are turned around, that gives you strength. And so the criticism that the vegans get, usually I look for ways to sort of turn it back around and you try to do it in a humorous way many times. And like, this is just ridiculous argument. And so it doesn't really bother me, quite honestly. More than anything, it just, what it does, and it amazes me that people would spend time, within my, we're talking about social media, because that's the only place I've ever interacted with them, quite honestly. I mean, when I gave a lecture in Malaysia a little over a year ago, I saw one vegan physician. She came up to me. We had a nice chat, and she was very cordial, and of course I was too. And just said, "Hey, look, this is what I believe. This is what I believe," and we went our separate ways. Nothing contentious. But the online stuff, the social media stuff, I don't know why vegans bothered to come onto my page and say stuff, because I don't spend any time. I give them no thought whatsoever as far as going on and hanging out on vegan pages and making comments. And so they come over there, and quite honestly, I'm like, good for you, because guess what? there's no one you're going to influence over here. The people that are on there following my stuff are not going to turn vegan anytime soon. So the more time you hang out trying to harass me, the less time you're going to have an impact on people that you might actually influence, which is good. I think that's good. So I'm happy to have them over there and wasting their time.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point. That's one thing that Zuby, when I interviewed him, we talked about that. And he goes, look, you're never going to convince someone, your religion or whatever it is, by screaming and cussing at them and yelling at them and telling them they're an idiot, right? So, and I've seen you say, hey, look, here's my data, here's my science. And so, I think trying to be, who was it that you debated? And it was very, very, you guys both, vegan, that you guys did a great job. It was very respectful and very good discussion. You guys both presented your data. Was it Katz? I don't know those guys.
Joel Kahn. It's probably Joel Kahn.
Yeah, it was Kahn. Yeah, it was Kahn. Sorry. Yeah, my bad.
Yeah,
Sorry, Dr.
I've
Kahn.
had a couple interviews with Joel Kahn.
Yeah,
I think Joel, for all the sort of crap, and there, you see there's some collegial, this fun, poking back and forth. And it's nice to have a foil that you can kind of bounce off of. And, I've had a lot of fun with Joel, and Joel's said F you, and dropped a few salty words my way, and it doesn't bother me. It's not like I'm going home crying, into a box of tissues every night, but that's just the way it is. And, and I think for all the sort of criticism he gets, and I give him, quite honestly, he's been a pretty good sport about it. And I think that's good. And I think, he's one of the guys that, he's actually admitted, hey, look, there seems to be something here. Maybe if you exclude junk food and eat meat, your health isn't as bad. It's not as good as a vegan diet, of course, is what he'd say, but he's at least willing to say that, maybe meat isn't the devil, and you're going to, you're destroying your health by eating a steak, which I think is just ludicrous that people think that. But that's
well, and you're the guy, like when I first heard about you, I go, okay, this guy's eating red meat every day. I didn't know you, and I was like, this guy's nuts. He's got to be like a gimmick. He's not really doing this. And then I started looking at you, and then I saw you, and I was like, oh my gosh, this guy's a beast. But then just seeing like your approach and your knowledge base, and having you on Low Carb MD, talking to you, go, this guy knows what he's talking about. And I think, Shawn, what we're going to find is decreasing visceral fat by whatever means necessary is going to make you healthier. And the carnivores have the lowest visceral fat. One side story that you'll like is bears, when they're hibernating, what they do, they put on a ton of visceral fat and they inhibit muscle mass, right? So they get really fat. And so I was asking a lady who works with bears, I said, hey, how do you guys get them fat? He goes, oh, we go to Walmart, donates food, and we give them donuts and cookies and all this processed food, and they get really fat, and then they hibernate, and then they're skinny again, right? So I said, what about the tigers and lions? And she said, oh, they won't eat that. They'll just eat meat and eggs. That's it. And they stay lean their whole life. I was like, oh, maybe Shawn knows something that we don't know, right? So yeah, it's very interesting, this topic from the health standpoint.
Yeah, there's, I think there is science that supports it clearly. I mean, you can extrapolate from the low carb data. I mean, interestingly, as you probably know, I've been really legitimately trying to get research done on this. And, Harvard, David Ludwig I've seen the preliminary data on the study. They've shown me the initial write-up. It's going to come out very interesting. I think it's going to turn a lot of heads. And I think it's something that I'm, proud to have at least sort of been the impetus, or at least part of the impetus in getting that going. And so I think it's going to hopefully, David will probably get it published in a pretty respectable journal, and have pretty significant impact. It'll probably be similar to his type 1 grit study, which he got published in Pediatrics and was, the #1 read article in that journal for the year. And so I think this could be a big, watershed moment for, maybe nutrition for the people that are open. This is one of those things, there's people that say, I don't believe you. And then you show them the data to convince them, and they say, I still don't believe you. And so it's, there's some you're never going to change your mind. But I think the ones that are open-minded in the middle, I think there's some room for, influencing people there.
Yeah. And we've noticed it from the beginning. I noticed it clinically. I noticed people, when they're carnivore, mood gets better, anxiety gets better, stress, addictions get better, and we have story after story after story. And I know you're seeing a lot more of that, and I know you have some great people that you're working with, to keep people online and really help from that standpoint. So that's really cool. And but we were seeing it. I go, I don't know why this is working, but I see it. I see people doing better. I don't care. I'm a doc. If people are getting better, I don't care what the mechanism is necessarily. I'd like to know it, but I think there's a lot with this visceral fat and hormones and brain chemistry and inflammation and all that.
Yeah, I think ultimately, at the end of the day, what the patient cares about is, doc, I just want to stop being depressed. I want to stop being fat. I want to stop being in pain. I mean, that's really what we're here to do. I mean, we're not here to adjust biomarkers or, I think, if you were to ask a patient, what was my outcome. They won't even remember that, but they remember when they're happy, and they remember when they feel good. And I think that's what we can, hopefully focus on. And, if you figure out the mechanistic stuff it's interesting. It turns on the drug company manufacturers, because, we saw this, there's a study on ketogenic animals, and they were showing how great they did on a ketogenic diet. But then the conclusion was, well, there's no way people would actually eat a ketogenic diet. So therefore we have to make a drug that does the same thing that this ketogenic diet
Yeah, when I
does.
was researching this visceral fat, there's a huge thing with the this TRPVR2, and it really initiates the cytokine storm with COVID. And they said, well, if we could only get a drug to do this, like, we'll get rid of the visceral fat and like watch your diet and exercise, go carnivore maybe, right? So yeah, it is kind of crazy. We want a drug for everything, and that's a big part of this problem we're in.
Yeah. I mean, I think, with the COVID response, I've been frustrated, as many physicians have been. And it's not just, whether we should wear a mask or take vaccines. I think it's the complete and utter, almost willful ignorance of the fact that these metabolically unwell people are seriously at significant disadvantage when it comes to, this and any infectious disease for that matter. I mean, you're always, and it should be, we're in a pandemic. Why isn't the Surgeon General? Why isn't the CDC? Why isn't every single politician on TV saying, look, stop eating junk food and start getting some exercise? I mean, that message should have been from every single person's mouth. I don't know if anyone said that. I mean, certainly no one in any major, it's just been us, quote unquote, quacks out there, saying that look, guys.
The data's there. The data's there, Shawn, with vitamin D deficiency, not exercising, closing the gym, but keeping open the fast food and alcohol, and, everyone's stressed and tense and worried. All these things we're talking about, this is like life's best medicine. We're talking about, look, it's not just your diet necessarily. It's the lifestyle, getting enough sleep, not hating the world, not sending nasty letters to Shawn Baker because of what he eats, right? Those kind of things. I think that's, I think looking at that, stepping back and saying, okay, look, let's look at the big picture.
No, absolutely. I think this is, that's a frustrating thing. I think, none of us are probably ignorant to the fact that the U.S. and many other countries are just struggling, collapsing under the weight of chronic disease. I mean, it's everywhere. We see it as physicians. You've seen it in your career get progressively worse and worse and worse. It's not getting better. What we're doing is not working. And you'd figure that, hey, we're going to shut down the entire economy. We're going to spend billions of dollars in rushing out, vaccines and mandates, and yet we're still not going to face the elephant in the room. We're still not going to turn around and say, look, enough is enough. How many people have to get sick and die before we finally say, okay, we screwed up. We've been focusing on the wrong things. Our food system is broken. Let's turn this around. Instead, it's like, let's keep status quo, but we're gonna make a new pill. And
yeah, and that's a big problem. And Shawn, I think one thing I've always taken offense to when people pick on you, you don't need my defense, by the way. I know that because you can handle yourself. But as a veteran, tell people your experience, what you experienced. I think people don't understand that. I want to give people a picture of you as a man and your, where you came from, being in the military, and things you've seen. Anything you want to share that molded you to be who you are as a warrior, I say.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think there's all the things in your life eventually impact you. My sort of relationship with sports and athletics has been something I've been in, since I was 8 years old. I was enamored. I remember it was Bruce Jenner that actually, back in I think it was the 76 Olympics when he won the decathlon. And I was like motivated by him. And I'm not particularly motivated by him later in life, but I mean, but early on I was like, this is pretty cool. And so I, got into athletics and sports and did that my whole life. And I've been training, I'm still training, at 54 years of age, been doing, lifting weights for 40 years now. Medical school, I went to, I remember I wanted to be a doctor. I think I knew I liked science, early on in life, 6th, 7th grade. I think we had a really hot looking science teacher in 6th or 7th grade. So I like science for some reason. She left to become, I think, an airline attendant, but her name was Mrs. Hayes, I remember. But I don't know if that motivated me to want to be in science or what, but I just kind of, I liked it. And then I remember I was literally studying for the MCAT when I was 16. I had a job at a restaurant because I was a busboy. I was a dishwasher, and I work during school, after school, before school, doing that stuff. And then I realized I want to be a physician, or I want to be a doctor someday. And so I started studying for the MCAT at 16 years of age, which is, you don't take that thing till you're a junior in college, right? So, I mean, I got through and I did well on the test and, did good grades and, got into medical school. But really, literally my first year in medical school, I started playing rugby. And then that kind of screwed me up, because then I ended up just being good at it. And so I got recruited to go play in New Zealand. So I actually dropped out of medical school, which was the people in the medical school thought I was nuts, and I probably was, but they said, "What, you're leaving medical school?" And, it was a decision I made. I was like, look, I want to pursue this athletic thing. So I did that it ended up being about 7 years. In between, when I came back from New Zealand, because they won't let you stay in New Zealand too long. It's, they just like, they don't want to have too many foreigners down there. And so when I got kicked back out of New Zealand, I came back to the US, and the best place to play rugby at that time was in the military. So I joined the Air Force. My father had been in the Air Force. And I remember I was talking to guys that were in all different services, the Coast Guard, Navy, Marine, Air, Army guys, and they all said, go in the Air Force. They're like, just go in the Air Force, dude. So that's what I did. And I was trained as a nuclear weapons launch officer. So I was one of the guys that would, press a button or turn the key to launch nuclear bombs. So believe it or not, they don't let nutty, crazy people do that. There's an incredibly, extensive psychological background testing you have to do. There's all kinds of these personality
How'd
things.
you trick them, man? How'd you do it?
Yeah, exactly. I tricked them. Yeah, really crazy. No, but I mean, I had this top secret ESI clearance, all the nuclear code stuff. And, it was interesting. I signed a thing that said I can't go to Russia or China for like 10 years or something. So I've never been to either of those places, but I mean, it was something that, because of the classified information, I was privileged to. But anyway, I did that until I was about 30 years of age, and I was still playing rugby. And I remember laying on the ground. I was in Las Vegas playing a Russian team, and I was laying on the ground. I had a really good game, by the way, but I'd score like a couple, three tries in that game. That's like the equivalent of a touchdown. So a really good game for the particularly the position I was playing. And I was laying there, and there's this guy just kicking me in the side of the head. And, because I was on a bottom pile, my head sticking out, my arms and legs are trapped. And I'm getting this guy just teeing off of me, kicking me on the side. I come out, there's blood pouring out of my ears. And I was like, I was 30, and I was like, I'm done with this stuff. I'm tired of this. So I went back to medical school. The military paid for it. Wow. I ended up going to, up in Texas, and, did well, graduated with honor, AOA honors, all that crap that you do in medical school. Got into ortho. Did my training down in Galveston, Texas, which is, I think they train like fully 1/3 of all licensed physicians in Texas train there. So it's a big, traditional program. And then went back into the military because they had paid for that education. So I owed them, I think, 4.5 years or something, it turned out. So I went back in. And then pretty much immediately got sent to Afghanistan. So right into the thick of things. This is like, right after my residency. So, out of your residency, you still don't know shit. I mean, you're signed off on, but you're not like where you need to be, where you are 5 years later once you start grooving it. And we were like in the thick of the worst trauma that I'd seen in my life. And and it was me and another guy, this guy named Tom Large. He's just a wonderful, great guy, great human being, funny guy, great surgeon. And we're thrown into the middle of the war zone in the middle of Afghanistan, and we are the referral center for the entire theater, the entire war theater. So they'd have all these what's called FOBs, forward operating bases. So people get blown up. The medics there would, they throw tourniquets on, they might throw some bandages on, maybe they'll do a field amputation or something like that. And then boom, they send them to us. And so we were inundated every day with all this trauma that was coming in from the forward operating bases, plus our own local trauma. So it was just nonstop doing trauma 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Just you two?
Just us two. And, there was a general surgeon, there was general surgeons, there was a plastic surgeon, there was, we had a pediatrician there, interestingly, because we had a lot of children too, which is interesting. We had a lot of kids that were involved in this. And so a lot of collateral damage with the local children. And so, and then, an ICU team and, all the stuff you'd want to have for anesthesiologists and stuff. And so that was kind of that experience. And that was just about 6 months. And I think I did something like 600 operations in 6 months, which is that's a tremendous high amount for what you normally see. And we had several mass casualties. We had, I remember Dick Cheney, when he was the vice president, came to visit. And I guess the Taliban got wind of that ahead of time. And so they staged a huge, massive bombing when he was due to arrive on our base, and they blew up the front gate. And the problem is all these local Afghan nationals would hang out there at our front gate because we would give them all kinds of stuff, give them toys and clothing and food. And so they were always playing out there. So they ended up killing, I don't know how many people, 30, 40 people, and like 20 casualties came in. And So, when you get a mass cal, like, and there's 20 people that are critically injured, that's a lot for a little hospital. We had 2 ORs. It was only a 2 OR hospital. They were tin roofs and wooden buildings. And, it's like this, crazy time, and people are trying to triage, it's like, okay, that guy's got brain sticking out. He ain't going to make it. Black tag him, these guys are critical red, all the belly wounds are going to be red, right? They're bleeding inside. So we rush those to the OR, and then, we're ortho guys, but we're in there assisting the general surgeons with all the belly bleeds. We're like in there, doing this, sewing up guts, and, doing as fast as we can. And we're going on and on and on. In the middle of that, they tell us, hey, we think there's a bomber within the hospital, while we're operating. And, your butt kind of puckers up a little bit, because you're like, shit, we could be dead any second now. And the question was, do we evacuate or do we finish the case we're in? And we all looked at each other and said, let's finish this guy. We got to save this guy's life. We get him closed up, packed up, away, and then we get the hell out of the hospital. And then it turns out, there wasn't anybody. But this is what the sort of the Taliban would do. They would stage a mass bombing, and then they'd sneak another bomber within the casualty. So that guy would pretend like he's sick, and he'd have another bomb on him, and then they blow up all the medics. And so that was a strategy that they would do. And so that was an interesting time, to say the least. So I saw it like
Shawn, how did you deal with that, like emotionally? Like when you look, because I've had times like in Guatemala, I'm trying to help with a clinic, and and look at the line, I'm like, oh my goodness, it's gonna be brutal. Like, it's an overwhelming feeling. Like when you're seeing this with young people and needless violence and stuff, how do you mentally, for instance, a family member of mine was in a major car accident, ended up not surviving, but had massive burns. It was a non-survivable injury. And I just saw how the burn unit people were. I'm like, man, if I had to do this every day, I don't think I could do it. My compassion, my heart, I was like, man, to cause pain and to see pain, I have a pretty little practice here now, but how did you deal with that emotionally?
Well, it was, like I said, we were seeing, and we saw kids. I mean, the worst thing I saw personally, I saw some really bad injuries. I think the worst personal tragedy story was a little kid. I think it was like a 5 or 6-year-old kid. And what happened was, they were helping the Americans, and the Taliban found out about it. So what they did was they strapped this family's kid to the back of a pickup truck, and like dragged him by a train and dragged him through town, and literally skin ripped off his he actually had a traumatic amputation from being dragged through the town. So we get this kid with basically burn wounds from friction burns, leg had been ripped off. And this is just horrible stuff. And not to mention, we had little kids stepping on landmines and blowing off stuff. So this is, really, really tough stuff. So like I mentioned, I was there with another guy, and he and I we gelled really good together. And we just kind of said, look, this is a shitty situation. We're going to do, you just became very clinical, because you couldn't attach yourself emotionally to this stuff, because it was very, it was just very disturbing. I don't think I had, to this day, I don't think there's any sort of PTSD stuff. Although I will say that when I see someone get hurt, on like I'm watching a movie and somebody falls, I get a negative visceral reaction to it. It just hurts me. It pains. I get like a little jolt. That's the only thing I can think of that kind of lastingly affected me with that. But like I said, you talk about the burn unit. So my intern year as a surgeon, I think my second rotation, the first rotation was like rehab, which was like a cakewalk. I was like, oh, this is residency's easy. And then I went into burn unit, and this is a Shriner Burn Hospital down in Galveston, Texas, one of the top burn centers in the country. And we got all these little kids. We had literally, it was a Shriner. So they would full court press everybody. There was no, pull the plug on this. You kept these kids alive no matter what. That was the agreement. They would pay 100% of the care. It was all free, because the Shriners would pay for it. But the rule was, no one gets to pull the plug, so you kept these kids alive no matter what. And I remember I had this little kid who was, he must've been 3 years old, something like 90% burned, like his whole body was burned up. And he was 3 colors. He was black because he was still charred. He was red because he was thrombocytopenic. He was bleeding everywhere. And he was yellow because his liver was failing, and he was jaundiced. So we had this kid who's looking literally like a monster. And they're speaking Spanish, because most of these kids were coming from Mexico. And I didn't speak Spanish, and he kept saying something to me. And I asked the nurse, what is he saying? He's saying, "Doctor, please kill me." A 3-year-old asking to do that. That was something that I thought was just, wow. Isn't that that's tough,
Dude,
and so I was like, and unfortunately, I think, but to answer your question, my burn unit lasted 1 month. I knew I only had to make it 1 month. When I was in Afghanistan, I knew I had a finite endpoint. If that was going to be like the rest of my career, man, that would be tough. I think it really would be. And so my hat is off to all these people. And, you see a lot of these old trauma docs. I mean, they're cynical. I mean, you can't help but do that. You're just like, oh, another idiot, because you deal with a lot of drunks and you deal with a lot of drug folks and people that are just, trauma. People say trauma is a disease because, I mean, there's a lot of repeat trauma offenders. It is like a chronic disease. There's these people that are victims of accidents and injuries and drunkenness and fights. That's, it happens to them over and over again. And so we see that. But, I mean, the fortunate thing was I always, and the same thing with the doc I was with, Tom, Tom Large. Funny thing, he married a girl named Meredith Woody. And so when they had the wedding, it was a large Woody wedding, which, just to put some humor into that. But, but he's out in Asheville, North Carolina. I think he's getting ready to move to Emory in Georgia to practice there. But, this was something that we both exercised. So we went to the gym every day we could. We both, it was literally like I was married to this guy. We lived in little huts. They call them bee huts. You had about an 8x8 size room. Had a little bunk bed. You put your stuff. You could barely turn around and walk in there. And you were in there with, my little hut had like eight guys in there. And, you'd hear rockets going off and there's bombs going up, nothing. I think the closest we ever had was about 500 feet away. But, you hear, I mean, there was an orthopedic surgeon killed while I was deployed. I think he was in another location, but I mean, a bomb hit him and he died. So we were, that was a possibility. But I mean, it's like one of those things where you just, you just kind of do the best you can. You try to make some sanity within the craziness. And so we use some humor. There was a lot of gallows humor coming along, which some people would be offended by, you're like, because of some of the stuff we would say, some of the jokes we'd make, but you needed that as a defense mechanism.
Yeah, people don't realize that. Yeah, people don't realize that because it's not that your callus is like some of these things are so bad. The stuff you saw is so bad. And I did a rotation trauma at USC, and that was I mean I was stunned by what I saw.
Gun and knife club, I'm sure there. It's probably it's kind of craziness, but
yeah, all you military guys with their training, because they said we don't see gunshot wounds like this. These are war wounds that we were seeing, right? And it's crazy. And I just remember sitting back and look at the trauma guys and the ortho guys, putting people back together. So I tease you guys, but man, there's a lot of respect because those guys, man, they all had atrial fibrillation, that kind of stuff because of the stress they're under 24/7 trying to save people. And a lot of it's self-inflicted wounds, but you don't judge. You just say, hey, look, I'm going to help this guy that's in front of me. I don't care if he's in a gang. I don't care what it is,
Yeah, I mean, and I, like I said, when I was doing my residency, we took care of a lot of the 3 months out of the year we spent on what's called TDC, which is Texas Department of Correction. It was all prisoners. And, most of them were pretty cool dudes. I mean, but I operated on death row guys. I mean, it was funny. I had a death row guy who needed a spinal fusion in his neck, and he was, he was myelopathic. I mean, he was literally like, shaking from his myelopathy. And it was funny because we were like, we've got you scheduled. And it was really hard to get these prisoners scheduled because you'd have to have security detail with death row particularly. They had to have these huge security. It was a nightmare to get them scheduled for surgery. And we got him on the schedule, and he said, oh man, I can't do it that day. I'm busy. And I said, you're on death row, dude. But it was just like, it was the funniest damn thing. But, we took care of death row. We took care of the worst people. I mean, I took care of, when I was in Afghanistan, I took care of literally Taliban guys who were, trying to kill us. One of the first days I was there, I remember the first time we walked in there, I remember we flew in, it was about a three-day trip, but from the US, I left from Norfolk, Virginia. We went up to Bangor, Maine, saw the old grandmas giving us lobster bisque, and then we flew over to Turkey and we sat on a runway literally for 8 hours on a plane because we weren't allowed to get off the plane. There was some mechanical issue. Then we flew into Manas in Kyrgyzstan, which is, used to be a former Soviet Republic country. And, it's freezing cold. And we sat out there, stand outside in the freezing. And then we fly into Bagram, Afghanistan at night. They turn off the lights because people are shooting at you. You land, you get in. And the Army was in charge of the hospital. We were actually transitioning from the Army to the military, to the Air Force. We were taking over, and so the Army guys were touring around. And we got in there. And the first thing we see is like, "Hey guys, there's a thing in the OR. You want to come help? Sure, we'll go help it out." This is this like 22-year-old Canadian kid, both legs blown off, above the knee. Just a young kid, and you're like, "Wow, this guy's life is utterly and irrevocably changed just on that incident." He's a special forces guy, so he has a beard. Special forces guys would wear beards because they could blend in that way. So it's like, that was the first thing. It was like day one is like the shit hit the fan, welcome to war. And it never let up. I mean, within the next day we had a guy who was, he was a bad guy. He was an enemy from Pakistan. He was a Pakistani, and he was like but he was a 17-year-old kid. And what happened was he was setting up a roadside bomb, and he blew himself up. And he blew, and what he ended up with 2 AKAs, so both legs above the knee. He lost his one arm below the elbow, and he had like 2 fingers left on the other hand. So he had nothing left. He basically had no limbs, no functional limbs. And some people say, well, he deserved what he get, but you think about it, it's a 17-year-old kid. The recruitment tactics of the Afghanistan, the Taliban was often, hey, look, you fight for us or we'll kill your family. And so this is a sort of thing. Can you blame a 17-year-old kid? So we, and this is the thing. So we treated this guy, and we literally did something like 10 operations on him, because we had to keep washing out his wounds, because these horrible blast wounds are just so incredibly high energy, and there's such infection stuff. We took him, we got him healed. We got him where we could discharge him. And it was like, what's this guy going to do with no arms and no legs in Afghanistan? There's not much. But what happened was we turned them over to the Afghan army, who promptly took him out and shot him in the head and killed him for being an enemy. And so we're like, this is just insanity, because we're here putting all these resources into this stuff. And so, I mean, some of the surgeons, like I remember there was one Army surgeon who was out in a forward operating base, and he was attached to a special operations unit. And he said, hey guys, every time you bring me an enemy combatant, I use up supplies that could help us. So they never got any more. So, I mean, basically what he basically said is, look, just go ahead and kill those guys. I didn't, that wasn't my call. Like I said, anyone that came in front of me that had an injury or a wound, as a physician, I'm like, I'm going to take care of you. I don't care what side you're on. You're a human being. I'll let the military, judiciary people figure that out, if they're going to punish you, but it's not my job to punish someone. So that was, that's some of the war stuff, which is kind of,
that's a huge
crazy.
point. That's a huge point. As doctors, we're called to help, and we're called to do what we can to help. And I think that's part of what motivates you and what you're doing now. Like, you see the devastation. I see the devastation of the amputations. Obviously it's cleaner than what you saw, but you see the inevitable coming if you don't control that sugar. About the blindness and diabetes and suicide, because you have this neuropathy and all that stuff. So people ask why we're so passionate. That's why we're passionate, because if we can intervene on pain and suffering and prevent it, we take that personal.
Yeah, I mean, and your point about the amputations. I mean, yes, I did a lot of traumatic amputations as part of war, but the majority of them, and I've done probably hundreds of amputations over the years. Majority of them were in diabetics or vascular patients. Vascular surgery patients are chronic smokers, but the diabetes, is just tremendously, And I can remember having to cut some guy's leg off, and he was so happy. He was so relieved because he felt so much better, because his leg was infected and it hurt all the time, and it was just like, you're so bad that you'd rather have your leg cut off because of the condition you're in. And and the problem, the sad part is, these people still, even after having legs cut off, still can't change their life. So, at that point you're like, well, what the hell? Why am I even alive? I might as well just eat cake until I die. And this is a point, you get to a point where it's like, there's no coming back from that. Your legs are never going to grow back. I don't care what diet you're on. Carnivore diet's not going to grow your legs back. So you got to intervene at a certain point. And that is,
and we help those that we can, right? The one
sure.
who you can help, you do. And that's why, like, you and Gary Fedke have much respect, because I know you're hurting your own business by helping people, right? Preventing the amputations. You could be busy doing amputations all day, but
I mean,
protecting
amputations,
that person.
Amputations as far as a procedure, you look at the CPT codes, and, we get paid on these things called RVUs, relative value units, and a knee replacement, which is far, far more complicated, and generally time consuming, would pay not much more than cutting somebody's leg off. And you could literally do it like a guillotine amputation. You can do it in friggin' 3 minutes. Just give me a saw, and, cauterize a couple vessels, and, tie some nerves up. And, that's a, so, but I don't want to do that. It's like, it's just kind of crazy how this stuff goes. But, yeah, I mean, like I said, as far as me harming my business as an orthopedic surgeon, I'm not actively practicing anymore, as you know. And so, I mean, all I'm doing is lifestyle stuff now. And so hopefully, my goal is to, harm the business of thousands of physicians, sorry to say. I mean, we should.
We have a shared goal, brother.
We should make ourselves relatively obsolete. Now, there's times, if I'm in a car accident and I got my femur sticking out, yes, take me to a hospital. If I'm having an acute heart attack, yes, take me to a hospital. But if I've got hypertension, or if I've got, diabetes, there's probably better options out there. I think we're part of it, and we're becoming the alternative market, so to speak. And I think hopefully as people start to wake up and they, or they just get sick of being sick and not getting better, and hearing the same old song and dance. Well, it's genetics. Well, we don't know. Well, it's bad luck. Here's another pill. Here's another pill. That, and that as an internist, that was probably part of your practice for a long time. Like, well, I don't know what's going on.
Well, it's like you have someone bleeding out and you're putting Band-Aids all over the place. Say, let's fix the bleed. You have to fix the bleed. And I think that's what we see. And you go, gosh darn it. The root cause, as Ivor Cummins like to say, we got to fix the underlying problem, because putting Band-Aids on stuff and throwing more drugs is not going to fix the underlying problem. And like you said, anyone who says a person who's just had both their legs amputated and is going blind is on dialysis and they can't stop eating candy, if you tell me that's not an addiction, you got some serious, you're going to get a serious argument from me.
Well, I mean, surprise, surprise, that person is also depressed, and imagine, why I'd be depressed if that was a situation, regardless of what else was going on. I mean, that's, why are you, I mean, it's hard to even imagine being alive at that point.
Well, plus we have studies show that it's the poorly controlled diabetics. They said, well, it's because they're depressed that they're poorly controlled, but really the poor control of diabetes comes first, is what we're finding. So the high sugars cause inflammation of the brain, metabolic health, and all this stuff you're talking about is so relevant, and it's devastating for us as doctors to see, like the stuff you went through, Shawn. That's why I have such respect, because I know what you've seen and what you've been through, and I think people need to know this side of you, because Jesus, oh, he's an idiot, he's a guy eating meat all the time and that's all he does. I mean, but you've seen the devastation, right? And I think part of it's like, how do you really, like back then, I was just curious. I know we got off the topic a little bit. Did you and your buddy, could you guys really talk about it, go, man, I'm struggling right now? Or was it like a macho thing and you just kind of kept it in?
Yeah, probably a macho thing. I mean, that's kind of the guy thing. And then you put, orthopedic surgeons are, they're kind of that way. I mean, and, I think that's probably maybe it's a character flaw or a benefit, depending on how you look at it. I mean, we would go to the gym, and I remember one time I was doing heavy power cleans, and I was trying to hit something like 325 pounds or something like, which is a decent clean. And I kept missing it. And I was just in the middle of this military gym, and I was swearing, like, F this, screaming. And I remember somebody came up to me and said, "Hey man, why are you cussing?" I'm like, "Well, I'm in a damn war zone," so I don't want to hear about you telling me about cussing, because I mean, that was kind of the outlet. Probably that was part of the outlet. And honestly, it's probably what I do today still, because I'm still training hard. And I think, that provides some sort of emotional release,
motivation and release,
rather than kicking my dog or yelling at my girlfriend or kids.
And for the record, I could say your dogs love you. Yeah, I was there and you're petting your little dog and they're on your lap. I'm like, everyone thinks this guy's like this beast and he has his little dog. And I was proud that my dogs are bigger than yours. I have a wimpy one now, kind of, but so we're on the same page that way. But no, I think that's true. I think people need to know, look, you're a human being, and that these are the things you've been through and done. And, I was curious, after like what you went through, I mean, were you ever able to sit down with any of those soldiers where you saved their leg or they lost their leg, or be able to sit down and talk to those guys? Or was it more like you were just the
It was kind of interesting. So we spent a lot of time with the Afghans. The American soldiers, we basically, because we were not a modern hospital equipped with everything you have in the US. So they quickly got shipped off to Germany. So we didn't do a lot of the definitive surgeries on Americans, because we would put external fixators on there. We would clean up wounds. We would bandage them, and we'd package them up for a plane. And, depending on when the weather was and when we could get a plane out, sometimes so we would have them for a day or two. But we would never got long extended period of time. We weren't doing multiple operations. So most of the people we took care of, quite honestly, were Afghans that hung around in the hospital. And the weird thing was, and we had, there's another set. So we had two brothers, Muji and Akbar. And they had this, they ran over an IED. They had all these horrible lower extremity trauma injuries. And we did, multiple surgery. We were putting skin flaps and skin grafts and, reconstructing, all kinds of broken bones. And, probably 10 surgeries, 12 surgeries between the two of them, got them fixed up. And we, through the translators, we had a really nice relationship, and we'd laugh and joke and, as best we could, speaking that I didn't speak Pashtun or whatever language they were speaking. But, we did sort of bond with these people. And then these guys, because they were helping us in the US side, they got released finally we got them to where they could be released to their local base. And then we got word that the Taliban caught them and killed them and executed them too. So it was just like, it's just like, even these people you try to help, so.
All the time and effort, and
Yeah. I mean,
you get to know them, and
it's
man,
war.
that's
Yeah,
just
war. I'll tell you, war sucks. War is stupid. I wish we never have any wars, but I know they're inevitable. I mean, that's just the unfortunate sort of nature of the humanity. Maybe one day we'll live in a society where there's no wars, but gosh, I think we're still a ways from that.
when I see you as a patriot, a guy who stands up for your country, put your life on the line for your country, right? And you want what's right and just.
Well, I mean, like I said, I wasn't out in the front line shooting at people and having people shooting at me directly, but certainly when they asked me to go, I had no hesitating going. And in fact, I was going to go a second time, and then they ended up, there was a surgeon that was trying to duck his responsibility by saying he was asthmatic, but yet he was running marathons, because they give you waivers for physical things, and he was like, well, I'm asthmatic. And they're like, wait, you can run marathons. So that doesn't make sense. So they sent him, and I was ready to go. I missed my son for part of it when he was a little baby, because when I left, he was a little baby. When I came back, he was a boy, and it was really weird, and then when he saw me, he screamed because he was scared. And it was just a weird sort of thing, dynamic. And unfortunately, I don't know how much that had to do with it, but the time in the military, I ended up divorcing my wife and my kids. And I think some of that probably played into that. I mean, there's other things going on there. And so that was a challenge. That was a big one of the, of the negative things that have happened to me in life. That was a real struggle, because I didn't get to see my kids every day, which is really, really tough.
And I think coming back, and it's just such a weird environment coming back. My friends who came back said it's just, you don't know how to deal, like doing stuff, normal stuff, like going out to eat and doing, like, how life is so different.
Yeah, it was funny because we spent 6 months with plastic spoons and forks. And it was such a funny joke, because the forks were of such low quality that you couldn't get through a meal without breaking the little
Tines off it. Yeah.
So we would always get like 2 or 3 forks. You were like, you need 2 or 3 forks to get through a meal. And we never got into a vehicle. The whole time I was there, I didn't get into one single vehicle. I walked everywhere. There was a road called Disney Drive on Bagram Air Force Base, which is the main sort of drag, and we walk and that was fine. It's good exercise to walk around. And the problem is, you're saluting constantly, because there's thousands of people walking. We were officers, and so we're saluting. So your arm would get worn out walking down the road. But you go to the dining facilities to eat, and we and the fun thing, they had some entertainment there, and sometimes they bring in like the cheerleaders and dance. We're all like these guys that basically are celibate guys sitting there looking at these hot chicks and going, well, this kind of sucks, But anyway, and then you couldn't drink. There's no alcohol allowed, because it's a Muslim country. And so I remember there was some, like 19-year-old, 20-year-old kids drinking a beer, and I got in huge trouble. This is just so silly. But we had one, and this is one thing, and hopefully there's not any Tom Arnold fans here, but he came to do a performance, And I remember my buddy Tom, the other surgeon, we walked like half a mile it was pouring rain to go see this guy, because it was the only entertainment we had. So it's like a USO show. Tom Arnold gets on the stage, and he's literally completely drunk and stoned. He's slurring his words. He can't even get to the routine. It was just pitiful. And I was like, I thought, how disrespectful. You're in a place where all these people are not allowed to drink or do anything, and we're in here, trying to save lives or, fight a war, and you're up there drunk off your ass. I lost all respect for that guy. And after that, now I don't know, maybe he sobered up and got better since then, but that was my sort of our take. We
the addiction part, right? The addiction part.
Well, we were there for like 10 minutes. We're like, this is ridiculous. And then we just walked back in the rain. So it was one of those kind of sad things. But the rest of the people that came over there to tour were, I think, did a good job.
Man, you had a life, brother. Yeah, you've had a life.
It's not over yet, man.
I know. You got a lot of fight in you, man. I see you working. I was like, oh my gosh, you're a beast, dude.
Well, I'm telling you, physical stuff. That's just like me brushing my teeth. That's my mental illness. I've always wanted to be physically strong and active, and I think it's healthy. It's beneficial to agree. What I'm discovering, is, I think, as much as I think exercise is important, and I do, and I think strength training is super important. I think those are some of the aspects of health, including a healthy diet, but just activity. You notice, and you and I are both doing this. We're standing for this interview, rather than sitting, because, particularly with these lockdowns, just sitting all day is bad for you. And I went from, as a physician, you're on your feet walking all the time. And I was, as a surgeon, I was running literally all the time because I was so damn busy. I mean, it was like run from room to room to room to room and then go to the OR. And, you take 2 seconds to eat, throw some food in your mouth and right back to the OR. Now I'm in a different situation where I'm doing podcasts, I'm doing computer work, I'm doing, stuff behind the scenes with a company, and it's a lot of sedentary work. So now this year I've, in the last actually 6 months, I've kind of discovered that I need to start being just activity throughout the day in addition to my stuff. So I try to get about 3 hours a day where I'm just moving, and it might just be standing doing my interviews, which all my interviews I try to do. I gotta get a standing desk at some point because I'm not in a really good part in the house, but I'll do a lot of walking. So the dogs are leaner right now because they walk probably something, I walk probably somewhere between 7 to 10 miles a day, and the dogs half the time are with me, so they're getting their 5-6 miles in a lot, so it's
What do you do when you're walking, man? Listen to Low Carb MD or Life's
yeah,
Best
I'm
Medicine?
listening to your podcast every time. No, I mean, sometimes I'm answering emails. Sometimes I'm creating some content. Sometimes
That's
I'm,
good.
just trying to work.
Yeah, that's good advice, man. Like,
yeah,
hey, you don't have to sit like sometimes I'll have to do callbacks and I'll go for a walk and do my callbacks and
yeah,
get outside a
yeah,
little bit and get some
yeah.
some
Well, I mean,
vitamin
you're
D.
in San Diego, so it's a beautiful place. If somebody's in, Edmonton, up there in the cold snow, it's tougher, but you can make do. I mean, it's important to do that, I think. So that's something that, like I said, as time goes by, I'm just going to figure out different strategy. Then, you try to translate that to help people. And again, I'm trying to walk the walk literally, and, like I said, there's a lot of people that are out there talking. And again, it's the same thing, you've lost a tremendous amount of weight. So absolutely hats off for that. I think people take you more seriously when you kind of, and I know it's
And we
sad.
have a responsibility. I have a
Yeah,
responsibility. Plus, I want to live a healthy life, man. If you
right.
look at
Sure.
polls, what's the
Yeah.
most important thing? Your health, family, too.
Yeah,
We
sure.
forget that, right?
Absolutely. Well, and that's not, this is, and this is something, I don't know, I posted this and I reposted it. Somebody put it on a Facebook group. I thought it was just a great saying. It was something along the lines is, of course you would die for your child, but would you be willing to live healthy for them? And, when you think about that, like, yeah, if a car is going to hit my child, would I run in there and jump and save them? Of course. But how often is that going to happen? Probably never. So really, what am I committing to? Something that's never likely to happen. But to be healthy, I have to do something every single day to be there for my kid. And many people are not willing to do that. They're like, oh, here, Timmy, go play with your computer game. I'm just going to sit here on the couch and watch my movies and eat my Cheetos. And, that is more often not. So if you think about that, if you really love your children, set the example for them, do stuff, spend time with them, encourage them to, engage in health. I mean, I think that's becoming a loss. I mean, you look at cooking. I mean, how many people know how to cook anymore? I mean, I taught you, I'm amazed when I see people that have never cooked a steak or never really
Well,
even
because you
cooked
got that
anything.
fancy thing back there. I saw that fancy thing in your backyard that you just throw your steak in there, does everything, and like
Yeah, I guess like a robot. Yeah,
flames
exactly.
everything. I'm like, man,
Yeah, I've got a lot of different cooking. I mean, as the more I go, like we talked about, I think I'm dry aging steaks now. So I've got some gadgets, like I said, I don't spend a lot of money on stuff. I don't have a bunch of fancy clothes. I drive a 2008 pickup truck. I don't have a fancy car. My girlfriend has some of that stuff, but I don't. I mean, I'm pretty low key on that stuff. But I got some steak equipment, and that's
But I was laughing, man, when I was at your house. We stopped by and you said, yeah, someone stole a bunch of my steaks. I'm like, what happened? They stole them off your front door. Your ring was out for a minute and they
yeah.
stole steaks off your. I'm like, who is crazy enough to steal steaks from Shawn Baker? I'm like, you kidding me? Like,
I'm
could you
sure.
imagine if they got caught? What would happen? You better hope he doesn't have a gun if he catches you stealing his steaks. Are you kidding
Well,
me?
yeah, I don't know what. Yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah, and,
It might have
that's
been Tro. I'm not sure, but
well, maybe he was sneaking around at out here in California. But anyway, yeah, that was a while ago.
hey, Shawn, I don't want to keep you, man. I really appreciate it. I'm so glad that people get to hear about you, because I got to spend a little time with you. And that was really a great day for me. I really enjoyed that. I brought my wife for protection just in case you got a little crazy. But like if you have to say, look, what lessons have you learned in life that are valuable lessons that motivate you right now, that keep you going, or stuff you learned back in the day or now, like your wisdom that speaks to you, or like where you find your peace?
Well, I think, and these are the things that other people certainly have said, but I think, every day counts. And I think, I delayed gratitude for a long time becoming a physician. It was just like, I'm going to put in this time in medical school and residency and undergrad and work and work and work until, you get to this point, oh, I've made it as a physician. And then all of a sudden you get there, it's like, wait a minute, what did I just give up? So don't forget to enjoy stuff along the, life's a journey, enjoy it while you're there, don't just focus on the end goal, or focus on the being alive and being in the moment and enjoying that stuff. I think some of the simple things, my girlfriend and I are, we just, we'll go for a walk outside and go watch the sunset, sometimes drive out to the beach and watch the sunset. And that probably is enjoyable or provides us as much happiness as anything else, realistically, so I think it's the simple things. It's probably the things, you're thinking about humans 100,000 years ago. There wasn't TV, there wasn't internet, there wasn't even books. I mean, what did you have to do? You hung out with your family probably, or your close friends. You watched the sunset, you interacted with nature. And I don't think anyone has ever sat there and watched the sunset and said, wow, this really sucks. I mean, we all sort of enjoy that. So I think if we realize what we sort of evolved in and who we are as a species, and I think that carries over to diet too, incidentally, but I think then you can kind of get sort of a sense of maybe the meaning of life or the purpose of life, and smile more, basically. And I know that's something, somebody will make fun of Ted Naiman for not smiling enough, but
yeah, man, you can never smile too much, man. People wonder what you're up to too. They're like, how's that guy
well,
happy?
sometimes they think you're psycho if you smile too much. This is a funny thing. I was in San Francisco, a couple of weeks ago, and I was walking around. Well, I'll admit it, I wasn't wearing my mask. I wasn't wearing a mask walking around outside because I think it's kind of
San
silly to walk
Francisco,
around.
man, you'll get
Well,
thrown in
yeah,
prison, man.
but I was like, man, I'm outside. I'm not gonna wear a mask when I'm outside. And I'd smile at people, and I mean, no one would even look at you. I mean, they're just head down, earphones in. And I think we're in a sad situation when people stop smiling at each other.
Yeah, looking back at like after 9/11, everyone looked at each other, everyone like interacted, then all of a sudden no one interacts anymore. I've noticed that too, and the masks don't help the situation from a human bonding standpoint. It's hard because a lot of people are in fear and anxious, and they lash out. I've seen that more and more, and I've seen, as a doc, I'm telling you, the stress, the anxiety, the depression, the hopelessness, that's part of why I did this podcast. And that's really why I wanted to have you on, to share your story, because I think a lot of people take you a superficial level and they don't see what's there. Like, you have a lot to you. There's a lot underneath the hood, and you care about people. And I've seen that, and I've seen it myself. And that's why I wanted to have you to share you, like, so people know what I see, right? Like, true, people don't see what I see, right?
Well, I mean, and I could easily, sort of display a softer side, I suppose. But, like at the end of the day, I'm trying to get the job done. And I've social media is a different beast. And, it's like, podcasts are different, tweets are different, Instagram's different. So you kind of, you go where the sort of the money is, I suppose. And I don't mean money in the terms of actual money, but I mean what actually moves the needle and works. And sometimes being pointed and direct, and sometimes cussing, and sometimes, calling idiocy what it is, works. And I think sometimes you have to be willing to do that. And there's, I know there's people in the background saying, yeah, you go get them, but they're not going to say it. They're thinking that, but they're not willing to say that. And you need the people that are willing to say that, because if no one says it, then we're in a sad place. And I think that's kind of, this is the thing. We're so divided right now. This is probably the most divided this country's ever, well, at least in my lifetime. There might have been some other times in before, like, probably around some of the 1960s when there was a lot of divisiveness. But I think right now, you pointed out to 9/11, we came together because we had a common attack against us. But now, the attack, for people that believe this is an attack on the U.S., it's to divide us apart. And that's clearly worked. And so hopefully we can figure out how to fix it. And I don't know here's what I would say. I think we can work on our health. And I think this should be the national priority should be get us to be a healthy society. I just think that's job one, and I know I'm biased because I'm a physician and I care about this stuff, but I think, environmental stuff, yes, that's important, but you can't have a healthy environment, or a healthy environment doesn't matter if everybody's sick and tired and depressed and obese and on 25 medications. So I think, I hope that somebody takes up the mantle, some of our leaders take up the mantle, and just pound that message home every day and really put some teeth into this. But and if they're not going to, I'm going to, and you're going to, and hopefully enough of us will do that.
Yeah, and I think that's what we do. We say we may have a different approach on some things, but hey, we're united in this, and that's what's great when we can start getting people together and go, hey, look, what do we have in common? You and I have a lot in common, right? And the longer I'm listening to you, the more I'm researching. I'm like, oh, Shawn might be right on a lot more stuff than we thought initially. But I think when we realize, look, when you are in an unhealthy food environment and you're eating terrible stuff, we have studies, Dr. Palmer and Dr. Nowitz just published on kids who are obese and have increased visceral fat having more bipolar disorder and schizophrenia. And, so metabolic health plays a role. And I think that's one thing, if anything, there's a lot taken out of this podcast, but I think saying, look, we're at war with metabolic disease. That is our Achilles heel in a great country. That is what's hurting us. Once COVID's gone, it's still there.
Yeah. I wish you could sort of, we could see metabolic disease as an actual physical enemy, because you're absolutely right. I mean, and it does impact us. And I think the mental health aspect is sorely, overlooked. And it is a tremendous, and mental health disorders have gone up, I don't know what the percentage is. It's several fold over the last several decades, and they continue to climb. And we've seen, how many, and I think the lockdowns have not helped that. I mean, we've seen a lot of suicides and, divorces and that type of stuff, and children that are probably going to be affected for this for years to come. So, but diet does help. Diet clearly has a role on mental health disease. And I think that's I remember, I think it might've been Tro that was made fun of for saying, hey, look, I think diet can affect, depression or something along those lines.
We both did. Yeah. We said depression, addiction, and all that stuff. We're like,
yeah. And exactly. Somebody pushed back, and I'm like, this is crazy. Why would you think the brain is not affected by nutrition and physiology?
It's part of the body, believe it or not, Shawn. I know you're a surgeon. You may not know that. You don't go above the knee or whatever.
Right.
So, man, Shawn, I so appreciate it. I don't want to take too much of your time. I really appreciate it. When people want to get in touch with you, how do they find you? I know you're doing some great stuff with MeatRx. Some of my favorite people are working with you. I don't know how you stole them from under me, but you guys are doing great stuff, and I've had a lot of great reports. So tell people a little bit about that on our way out.
Yeah. So MeatRx is, right now what it is, it's a community support platform. It's a resource for people who want to do a meat-based diet. And so we've got research, we've got support, we've got coaching, we've got meetings, we've got 40 some meetings for different categories, whether it's food addiction or women's meetings or diabetes meetings, or, you kind of name it. We've got the gamut there, and it continues to grow, and it's an international community. I'm there every single day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, unless I'm on an airplane. I'm there for the meeting. So I host guests. Some of the times it's a podcast, but most of the time it's me just answering people's questions. So that's the best place to find me if you want to actually interact with me on video and talk directly. Other than that, I'm on the social media, Shawn Baker 1967, Twitter, SBakerMD. I've got a YouTube channel, which I sometimes put videos on. But with MeatRx, like I said, right now it's a community, it's a support community, but we're looking on doing some significant stuff and some really important stuff with data collection and trying to figure this stuff out using a ground up approach. And I think, fortunately I have someone that's a very facile, machine learning specialist. That's my partner. And we're going to start moving into that direction, this year is what I hope to start doing that stuff. So we're going to not only support people, but also try to figure some of this stuff out. And I think, in a way that hasn't been looked at before.
Yeah, man. Thanks for all your work. Thanks for standing, taking the shots for us all, man. I really appreciate you stepping up, and don't think I'm not cheering for you when I see you going on little tirades on Twitter. I've always got your back, man. I try to, but I'm not as big as you, man. But hey, everyone,
it's
go ahead, Shawn.
Like I said, I think the nice thing is, and this is what I'm going to say. I don't know for sure what it is, but I'm 100% certain that I'm going to be wrong about something, or many things probably. I mean, that's just, I think that's just sort of normal, I think, realistic sort of stuff, and that's how science works. But fortunately, a lot of the stuff I've been talking about for several years seems to be grounded in the truth, and I think more people are finding out about it. And I think you can't suppress the truth forever, and so we're finding out that I don't believe that meat is bad for humans. I just on face, it just sounds like a crazy idea, and I think when you truly evaluate it in a true fashion, not some epidemiological study when they're eating 90% junk food and a piece of hamburger bun, hamburger patty mixed in with that. When we start looking at it, it's just it's bearing fruit, and so to speak, or bearing ribeyes, if you want to use the correct analogy, perhaps. We have a Harvard study. We're going to get research done, and so we'll see.
Yeah,
Time will tell.
I think there's so much confusion and biases, and this year or last year, going into this year, I think we've seen the most corruption ever in the history of medicine in some of the studies that are published and the motivations for that. And I think we're gonna, as physicians, we're gonna have to call people to the table and have them answer for what they're doing.
Yeah, I agree 100%. The articles were published and retracted, and there's a lot of, I think there's a lot of people that have, this is a sad thing. I think a lot of people, physicians included, have lost faith in the system. They've lost faith in the process. The sort of the emperor's, behind the curtain, we've seen the sausage being made, and a lot of us don't like the way it looks. And, the same thing around, any topic, whether it's medical stuff, like some of the politics stuff. A lot of people just, they don't have a lot of faith in things anymore. And that's unfortunate. And that probably calls for, maybe a new way to do it, or a new leadership, or a new system. I don't know what it's going to be.
Yeah, I think, united we stand. So I think that's the things that, hey guys, look, we have to look at what we have in common. We build on those things. We support each other and help each other. Don't hate each other for what you eat or what you think, those kind of things. Be accepting of other people as you want to be. And Dr. Baker here really proves that point of saying, hey, look, don't judge the book by its cover. He's been through a lot. He's dealt with a lot, and showing disrespect to a war hero really is it's brutal to me, man. And I think most people feel that way. So everyone, be kind to yourself, be kind to others. Thank you for listening. I know we went a little long, but I really wanted people to know who Shawn Baker is, and someone I respect a lot. And Shawn, thanks for coming. Appreciate it.
I just want to comment on. I don't necessarily think of myself as a war hero or anything. I've done some stuff that some people haven't done, but I still think at the end of the day, you earn the respect, and I'm happy for people to disagree with me and disagree vehemently. I don't care. At the end of the day, I'm going to do what I think is right, regardless of, what someone else thinks. I'm going to do what's right based on the results that I see. And that's what motivates me more than anything else. Not to make someone happy or smile or to get likes or those types of things. It's at the end of the day, it's like, how many people's lives can we help? And I think that's just what I'd like to say at the end.
Yeah, that's life's best medicine right there, man. Helping people, doing what you can, doing what you think's right, sticking to your integrity, and you're doing it. So thanks again. Thanks everyone for joining us, and take care of yourselves. Thank you for listening to this episode. We greatly appreciate your support. We would greatly appreciate a positive thumbs up on all of the platforms like iTunes and Spotify or wherever you're listening. And we just thank you for our Patreon supporters. We greatly appreciate your help in getting this message out. We think there's a lot of important information, and hopefully this helps you. Have a great day, and thank you for listening, and thank you for your support.